Hello again, and welcome back to our summer challenge, Ancient Paths, as we are reading through our confessions, the three forms of unity, together this summer, and starting with the Heidelberg Catechism. Today is Lord's Day 2, and so without further ado, let's read Lord's Day 2 and then talk about three quick things about what we find here. So, Lord's Day 2 has three questions and answers in it, questions 3 through 5 of the Catechism. So, question 3 says, how do you come to know your misery? And the answer is, the law of God tells me. Question 4 says, what does God's law require of us? And the answer is, Christ teaches us this in summary in Matthew 22. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets, that is, all the Old Testament teaching, hang on these two commandments. Question 5 then is, can you live up to all of this perfectly? And the answer is no. I have a natural tendency to hate God and my neighbor. So, three quick things about Lord's Day 2. The first is that the Lord's Day 2 begins with what is referred to as the first use of the law. We talk about three uses of the Old Testament law, the moral law specifically. The first of these here, that is a teacher of sin. And so we come to understand our misery, or the misery that we have plunged ourselves into, because the law of God shows us what we have become in our sin. So it's the first use of the law. By the way, the second use of the law is as a restrainer of evil. So it's why laws are based on the moral law of God, so it can restrain evil and are harming each other. And the third use of the law then, in the Catechism, we'll get to this later on, is after being redeemed, we're brought back to the law. As Jesus says later, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. From a different heart, a different perspective. But so first we start with the first use of the law here as a teacher of sin, and that is how we come to understand the depth of our misery. And this continues on then to serve in this capacity because we continue to live in those three dynamics, or those three principles or points of the gospel, as we talked about last time. So this will continue to serve its purpose in us as we continue to cycle through those three things: sin, deliverance, and thankfulness, although in an ongoing way throughout life. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that love is the summary of the law. And that might come as a surprise that if you were to summarize all of Old Testament law with one word, and that word would be love, that might come as a surprise to many. And yet that's the way Christ summarizes the law: love for God and love for others. But, of course, that love has to have a biblical definition, and there's various places that we can go to for that biblical definition. But I like the one here in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. And here Paul is, of course, writing to Timothy, a young pastor, and he starts there in verse 3. As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus so that you can charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, that is something contrary to what Paul has taught him, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith. The aim of our charge, he says, is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. So that kind of love is what is a fulfillment of the law as it's outlined here and as Christ outlines it in Matthew 22. So that's the second thing, love and its definition being the fulfillment of the law. The third quick thing is, with regard to question 5, it seems kind of a little over the top to say that I have a natural tendency to hate God and my neighbor. I think for a lot of people they say, well, I don't know, I might not like him a lot, but hate him? But I think we have to understand it in the way that the Catechism means to refer to hatred, that hate is an essential aspect of our rebellion, and it flares when our rebellion is challenged. So depending on our circumstances and situation, more of our tendency toward hatred for God and more of our tendency toward hatred for others will come to the surface when we're pressed. And so, if we are unredeemed and God is pressing on us, our hatred for Him will continue to grow and demonstrate itself, manifest itself in us, the more we feel that He is seeking to take control of what we want control of. And the same thing with others. So, while most days you might not necessarily feel as though, or the unredeemed person might not feel as though they have a great hatred toward God today, or a great hatred toward other people today, that hatred is there in the fallen heart, in the rebellious heart, and it will come to the surface if the circumstances dictate. So, those are our 3 quick things for Lord's Day number 2.